My fiancé's sister whispered, "She's only marrying you for the green card. She has a husband back home." At the rehearsal dinner, I said nothing. Then I contacted immigration with proof, canceled the wedding, and her husband flew in for the ceremony, when they were both detained at the airport and she blamed her sister. I know the title sounds like the plot of a bad TV movie, but welcome to my life for the past 6 months. What follows is the cautionary tale of how I nearly became an accessory to immigration fraud, and how my ex-fiancé's own sister saved me from that fate. Some background. I'm Daniel, 32M, born and raised in Chicago, working as a cybersecurity consultant. I travel frequently for work, which is how I met Adriana, 29F, 2 years ago. I was in Bogota, Colombia for a 3-month contract with a banking group, and she was the trilingual, Spanish, English, Portuguese, administrative assistant assigned to our team. Adriana was gorgeous, intelligent, and seemingly genuine. We hit it off immediately. Our relationship began professionally, but quickly turned personal. What I liked about her was that she never seemed impressed by my American status or salary. She had a good job, her own apartment, and came from an upper-middle-class Colombian family. Her father was a retired judge, her mother a university professor. They'd sent her to study in the UK for a year during college. She was worldly, independent, and ambitious. When my contract ended, we decided to try long distance. For about a year, we alternated visits. I'd fly to Colombia for a week. She'd come to Chicago for 2 weeks, the maximum her tourist visa allowed. After a year of this, we started discussing more permanent options. The constant back and forth was exhausting for both of us. In June 2021, I suggested we get married. It wasn't just for immigration purposes. I genuinely loved her, and we wanted to build a life together. She initially seemed hesitant, saying she didn't want me to think she was using me for immigration purposes. I appreciated her concern, which only made me trust her more. Eventually, she accepted, and we got engaged in July 2021. We began the K-1 fiancé visa process immediately, knowing it would take 7 to 9 months. During this period, Adriana continued to visit using her tourist visa. The K-1 visa was finally approved in February 2022, and she moved to Chicago in March. We set our wedding date for June 15, 2022, well within the 90-day requirement for K-1 visas. Everything seemed perfect. She found an apartment near mine. She insisted on having her own place until the wedding, which I respected, and continued working remotely for her Colombian employer, which was legal under her visa status while waiting for our marriage and her adjustment of status application. I never had a single suspicion. She paid her own rent, split our dinner bills, and even insisted on a prenup to protect my assets. She didn't fit any of the stereotypes of someone seeking a green card marriage. She had her own money, her own career, and never asked me for financial help. If anything, she was fiercely independent to a fault. The first hint of trouble came when I tried to involve her in wedding planning. She seemed oddly detached from the details, saying she trusted my judgment on everything from venues to menus. I chalked it up to cultural differences and her busy work schedule. Then her sister Catalina arrived from Colombia for the wedding, 3 weeks before the big day. Catalina was the opposite of Adriana. Where my fiancé was warm and charming, Catalina was reserved and watchful. From the moment she arrived, I sensed an unusual tension between the sisters, though Adriana dismissed it as their normal dynamic. The real bomb dropped at our rehearsal dinner, 2 days before the wedding. We'd rented a private room at an upscale restaurant downtown. Both our families were there. My parents, brother, and extended family from my side, and from Adriana's side, her sister, her cousin Miguel who lived in Miami, and her parents who had flown in from Bogota. During dinner, I stepped out to take a call from a colleague handling an emergency at a client site. When I returned, I noticed Catalina watching her sister with an unreadable expression. As I sat down, Catalina leaned over while Adriana was engaged with my mother and whispered in accented but clear English, "She's only marrying you for the green card. She has a husband back home. His name is Rafael Mendez." I kept my face neutral even as my mind raced. Catalina slipped me a folded note with a name, email, and phone number, then turned to engage my father in conversation, as if nothing had happened. I excused myself again, locked myself in a bathroom stall, locked and opened the note. It contained contact information for someone named Rafael, along with a Colombian phone number and email address. Below that, Catalina had written, "They've been married for 4 years. The plan is to divorce you after she gets permanent residency. She gets the green card, he joins her later, then they take what they can from you. I have proof, I'm sorry." My first instinct was that Catalina was lying out of jealousy or spite, but why would she provide specific details that could be easily disproven if false? And why had she traveled all this way just to sabotage her sister's wedding? It didn't make sense as a malicious lie. I returned to the dinner, somehow maintaining my composure. Adriana didn't seem to notice anything was wrong, though I caught Catalina watching me carefully throughout the evening. I avoided alcohol, needing a clear head. After dinner, I drove Adriana to her apartment, declining her invitation to come up with the excuse of an early meeting the next day. As soon as I got home, I began investigating. First, I searched for Rafael Mendez on social media. I found him quickly, a 35-year-old business owner in Bogotá. His profile was public and showed several photos from 2019 of him and Adriana together. Nothing explicitly romantic, but they were clearly close. Next, I emailed a colleague who worked in our Colombia office, asking as casually as possible if he knew anything about Adriana being married. His response, arriving hours later, was damning. Yes, to Rafael Mendez, bit of a shady character in the import business. Why do you ask? I spent the night combing through every photograph, email, and message Adriana had ever sent me. There were subtle inconsistencies I'd never noticed before. References to weekend trips that didn't align with our video calls, unexplained absences she'd attributed to work or family commitments. Most damningly, I found an Instagram account under a variation of her name that she had never mentioned to me. It wasn't private, just one she hadn't disclosed. On it, she'd posted photos with Rafael as recently as December 2021, 5 months after our engagement. In one, they were clearly wearing wedding rings. By morning, I was certain Catalina was telling the truth. I was being used. I contacted an immigration lawyer at 7 a.m., explained the situation, and asked about my options and potential liability. He advised that I could potentially face serious legal consequences for knowingly entering a fraudulent marriage for immigration purposes, including fines up to $250,000 and imprisonment for up to 5 years. He recommended I document everything and report the fraud to USCIS immediately. Next, I called Rafael using the number Catalina provided. It was 6 a.m. in Colombia, but he answered. I introduced myself in Spanish and said simply that I knew about his marriage to Adriana. There was a long pause, then a string of Colombian profanity. Finally, he asked what I wanted. Just the truth, I replied. My lawyer had advised me that Colombia, like Illinois, is a one-party consent state for recordings, meaning I could legally record our conversation without informing him, which I did. To my surprise, Rafael was forthcoming after his initial shock. He confirmed he and Adriana had been legally married for 4 years. They had concocted the plan together. She would marry an American, obtain permanent residency, divorce me after the conditional period, then petition for him to join her in the U.S. as a spouse once she became a permanent resident. I took careful notes in addition to the recording, documenting his statements. When I asked why he was admitting this, he laughed bitterly. Because she's been sleeping with my cousin Miguel in Miami for months, the one who's at your wedding right now. That was the final piece of the puzzle. Miguel, the cousin who'd flown in from Miami, wasn't her cousin at all but Rafael's. Apparently, Adriana had a pattern of betrayal. I thanked Rafael for his honesty and ended the call. Then I contacted Catalina, confirmed her allegations, and asked why she'd decided to tell me the truth now, just days before the wedding. I wanted to tell you sooner, she explained, but I needed proof first. I only found the messages between them on her laptop 3 days ago while she was in the shower. She'd left it open. I couldn't let you go through with this without knowing. What about your parents? I asked. Do they know? Catalina sighed. They suspect something isn't right, but they don't know the extent of it. My father would be devastated if he knew she was committing fraud. That's why I haven't told them everything. That explained the uncomfortable dynamic I'd sensed with her parents. They weren't complicit, just confused by their daughter's behavior. I then asked Catalina about her motivation for exposing her sister. Because what they're doing is wrong, she said simply. And because Adriana has done something similar before. Before? My stomach dropped. Catalina hesitated, then explained that 5 years ago, Adriana had been involved with a Canadian businessman. While nothing had progressed to marriage, she had misrepresented their relationship on Canadian visa applications. When Canadian authorities questioned some inconsistencies, she abandoned the attempt and returned to Colombia. She hadn't been formally charged, which explained why her subsequent U.S. visa applications weren't flagged, but it established a pattern. Armed with this information, recordings, and screenshots, I made 3 decisions. 1. I would not be marrying Adriana. 2. I would report the fraud to USCIS with all my evidence. 3. I would confront Adriana, but strategically. I called the venue and canceled the wedding, citing discovery of fraud in our contract's emergency cancellation clause. Remarkably, they were sympathetic and refunded most of my deposit. I then sent a mass email to all guests stating that the wedding was canceled due to recently discovered deception, and that I would provide details when appropriate. Then I called Adriana and told her we needed to meet at a coffee shop near her apartment to discuss final wedding details. She agreed readily. At the coffee shop, I laid out everything I knew, showing her the evidence piece by piece. As I spoke, her expression shifted from confusion to shock to cold calculation. When I finished, she didn't deny anything. Instead, she switched strategies. "You knew deep down this was a marriage of convenience," she said coolly. "American men and Latin women, it's always a transaction. You get a beautiful wife, I get a better life. Don't pretend you didn't understand the arrangement." I was speechless. In her mind, I had implicitly agreed to a fraudulent arrangement simply by proposing to a woman from another country. The entitlement was staggering. "The arrangement," I finally said, "was that I loved you and believed you loved me. That's the only arrangement I ever agreed to." She then shifted to threats. "If you report this, you'll be investigated too. They'll assume you knew. Is that what you want? To risk your career, your reputation?" "I've already spoken with an immigration attorney," I replied truthfully. "I've been advised on exactly what steps to take to protect myself." The color drained from her face. Then her eyes narrowed. "Catalina," she hissed. "That puta, she's jealous. She's always been jealous. She's making this up." "Rafael confirmed everything," I countered. "And so did your former colleagues in Bogotá." At that, she stood up so abruptly her chair fell backward. People turned to stare. "You've ruined everything," she spat, then stormed out. I immediately went to my office, compiled all my evidence into a comprehensive file, and submitted a formal fraud report to USCIS through my immigration lawyer. I included the recorded confession from Rafael, screenshots of social media posts, communications with colleagues confirming their marriage, and Catalina's testimony. The lawyer advised me that USCIS investigations typically take months, but that my fiancé's case might be expedited due to the comprehensive evidence and the fact that she was actively in the process of committing fraud, rather than having done so in the past. What happened next was unexpected. Rafael, apparently furious about Adriana's affair with his cousin, decided to fly to Chicago. He contacted me from the airport in Bogotá, saying he was coming to confront both of them and to provide additional evidence to authorities. I warned him that I'd reported everything and that he could face detention upon arrival, but he didn't care. "I want to end this once and for all," he said. "I have documents proving our financial arrangements that will help your case." I notified my lawyer immediately, who contacted the Department of Homeland Security and the specific USCIS fraud investigation unit assigned to my case. Given the circumstances and the fact that Rafael was voluntarily traveling to provide evidence of his own criminal activity, they took special interest. 3 weeks after I had filed my initial report, and 1 week after what would have been our wedding date, Rafael flew to Chicago. My lawyer had been in communication with the authorities, who were prepared for his arrival. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, officers detained Rafael upon entry for questioning regarding immigration fraud. According to my lawyer, who was present as a material witness, Adriana and Miguel had gone to pick him up, not knowing that he was cooperating with authorities or that immigration officials would be interviewing him. When Adriana spotted the CBP officers with Rafael, she attempted to leave the airport but was stopped for questioning as well. Both she and Miguel were detained, not arrested, as detention for immigration violations is an administrative, not criminal matter initially. Rafael provided documents showing their marriage certificate, joint financial accounts, and text messages discussing their plan. Adriana spent 3 days in immigration detention before being released pending her deportation hearing. Her K-1 visa was immediately revoked. Rafael was allowed to return to Colombia after providing his evidence, though he was issued a 5-year ban from entering the United States. Miguel, who had permanent resident status, was placed into removal proceedings for his role in the scheme. Adriana showed up at my apartment the day after her release, alternating between threats and pleading. When neither worked, she accused Catalina of orchestrating everything out of jealousy. "She's always wanted what I have," Adriana insisted. "She told you lies because she wants you for herself." I just shook my head and closed the door. The next day I changed my locks and phone number. The legal aftermath has been complex. I've had to give statements to USCIS investigators and may have to testify if the case goes to court. My lawyer assures me that I'm not a target of the investigation, as I reported the fraud before the marriage occurred and have cooperated fully. Adriana's deportation proceedings have been ongoing for several months. Rafael voluntarily returned to Colombia, but provided sworn testimony against Adriana via video conference. Miguel's removal proceedings are also continuing, with the likelihood that his permanent residency will be revoked. As for Catalina, she stayed in Chicago for a month after the incident to give her statement to authorities. During that time, we had several long conversations about her sister and family dynamics. Contrary to Adriana's claims, Catalina had no romantic interest in me. She's happily married to a woman in Colombia. Her only motivation was preventing another man from having his life ruined by her sister's schemes. Before returning to Colombia, Catalina apologized for not warning me sooner. "I wasn't sure until I came here and saw how she was acting with you," she explained. "Then I found the messages confirming everything. I had to tell you." I thanked her for her courage and honesty. Without her intervention, I would likely be married to Adriana now, unwittingly committing a federal crime that could have destroyed my life when it eventually came to light. It's been 6 months since the wedding that never happened. I've moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood and thrown myself into my work. The experience has left me wary, but not bitter. I've started dating again, cautiously. I've learned to pay attention to inconsistencies and trust my instincts when something feels off. Most importantly, I've learned that not every person from another country seeking to marry an American is committing fraud. That would be an unfair and xenophobic conclusion. But I've also learned that love doesn't make you immune to being deceived, and that skepticism isn't the same as cynicism. It's possible to be open-hearted while still protecting yourself. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, my advice is simple. If someone's sister travels thousands of miles to warn you about a fraud, listen to her. She probably knows something you don't. Update: 1 year later. It's been a year since the wedding that wasn't, and I've received so many messages asking for updates that I figured I should post one. First, the legal situation. After numerous hearings and appeals, Adriana was formally ordered removed from the United States last September. She's been barred from entering the United States for 10 years due to immigration fraud. Rafael, who cooperated extensively with authorities, received a 5-year entry ban, but avoided additional penalties. Miguel was stripped of his permanent resident status after his removal proceedings concluded and was deported with a 10-year ban as well. I had to testify at Adriana's immigration hearing, which was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. She stared at me with pure hatred throughout my testimony. Her lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive ex who reported her out of spite after she tried to break up with me. Fortunately, the evidence was overwhelming, especially with Rafael's cooperation and Catalina's testimony. Speaking of Catalina, we've stayed in touch. She's become something of a friend, sending me occasional updates about life in Colombia and checking in to make sure I'm doing okay. She and her wife are expecting their first child in December, and they've invited me to visit once the baby arrives. I'm seriously considering it. The most surprising development came 3 months ago when I received a message from a woman in Vancouver. She introduced herself as Elise, the ex-girlfriend of the Canadian man Adriana had attempted to manipulate before me. Apparently, Elise had been trying to track down other victims of Adriana's schemes after learning about my case from Catalina. According to Elise, her ex-boyfriend James wasn't as fortunate as I was. Though they hadn't married, he had supported her financially and on visa applications under false pretenses. When Canadian immigration questioned some inconsistencies, Adriana abandoned the attempt, but James had already spent thousands of dollars on her and suffered reputational damage in his community. The experience had destroyed his career in banking and led to a deep depression. Elise and I spoke for hours, comparing notes on Adriana's methods. The parallels were chilling. Same approach, same insistence on independence, same sudden detachment when immigration paperwork was involved. Elise's description of Adriana's behavior was so familiar it gave me goosebumps. We've remained in contact, and she's been a valuable source of perspective as I've processed this experience. As for my personal life, I've been dating someone for about 4 months now. Julie is a prosecutor with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, whom I met, ironically, at an immigration policy discussion hosted by my firm. She's brilliant, direct, and refreshingly straightforward. When I told her about my experience with Adriana on our 3rd date, she asked detailed questions about the legal proceedings that made it clear she was mentally taking notes for future cases. "You know," she said after I finished the story, "I'm going to need to see your birth certificate and credit report before this goes any further." I thought she was serious until I saw the smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Her sense of humor about the whole thing has been healing. I've also made changes professionally. My firm has developed a specialty in cybersecurity for immigration services, helping legitimate immigrants protect their identities while assisting authorities in identifying fraud patterns. The work is challenging and meaningful. Last month, I received an unexpected letter from Raphael. It had been screened by my lawyer first, who assured me it contained no threats. Raphael wrote to apologize for his role in the scheme and to thank me for inadvertently freeing him from a toxic relationship. According to him, Adriana is already engaged to a businessman from Spain, which suggests she hasn't learned anything from this experience. I almost feel obligated to find a way to warn the poor guy, but my lawyer strongly advised against any contact with Adriana or anyone in her orbit. The lessons I've learned from this experience are too numerous to list, but the most important is this. Trust is essential, but verification isn't an insult to that trust. Cultural differences and long-distance relationships can create natural communication gaps that dishonest people can exploit. Being alert to inconsistencies isn't paranoia, it's self-preservation. To the many people who messaged me asking if they should be suspicious of their own international relationships, no, you shouldn't automatically doubt someone just because they're from another country. Most relationships, international or otherwise, are genuine. But if multiple people close to your partner are trying to warn you, or if you're seeing patterns of deception, don't ignore those red flags. And finally, to address the uncomfortable question many have asked, no, I don't believe this experience reflects on Colombian people or culture in any way. I've met many wonderful, honest Colombians through this ordeal, including Catalina. Fraud knows no nationality. It's about character, not country. Life moves forward. What seemed like a catastrophe a year ago now feels like a fortunate escape. And sometimes the most important wedding gift comes from the person you'd least expect, your almost sister-in-law, whispering a truth you desperately need to hear. Update, 3 years later. I hadn't planned on updating again, but so many people have reached out asking how things turned out that I figured I'd share where things stand now, 3 years after the wedding that wasn't. First, the biggest news. Julie and I got married last year in a small ceremony at the Chicago Cultural Center. We wrote our own vows, which included a tongue-in-cheek promise from her to never have a secret husband in another country. Her sense of humor about my past has been one of her greatest gifts to me. Julie is now working as a federal prosecutor specializing in immigration fraud cases. My experience actually informed some of her career choices, and she's passionate about distinguishing between legitimate immigrants and those abusing the system. We often joke that Adriana inadvertently created a specialized legal team dedicated to stopping people exactly like her. As for Adriana herself, I've maintained a strict no-contact policy, but information occasionally reaches me through Catalina. Apparently, the relationship with the Spanish businessman fell apart when his family hired a private investigator who uncovered her history. She's now back in Bogotá, working for her father's friend's company, and according to Catalina, telling anyone who will listen that she's the victim of American xenophobia. Some people never take responsibility. Rafael, surprisingly, has turned his life around. After cooperating with U.S. authorities, he provided information that helped uncover a larger marriage fraud ring operating between Colombia and the United States. In exchange, while his ban from entering the U.S. remains in place, he avoided more serious legal consequences. He's now running a legitimate import-export business and is engaged to a woman who actually lives in Colombia. Miguel was deported back to Colombia and reportedly hasn't spoken to either Adriana or Rafael since the airport incident. According to Catalina, he moved to Argentina to start fresh. Speaking of Catalina, we've remained friends. My wife and I visited her and her family in Colombia last year, spending 2 weeks exploring Bogotá and Cartagena with them. Their daughter, now 2 years old, calls me Tío Daniel, Uncle Daniel, which still makes me smile. During our visit, we never ran into Adriana, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't scan every crowd nervously. Catalina assured me that her sister would never risk an encounter, as it would require acknowledging her actions. One unexpected development has been the community that's formed around my story. After my last update, I was contacted by several people who had similar experiences with marriage fraud. With Julie's legal expertise and my tech background, we started a support group that has evolved into an advocacy organization. We provide resources for people who suspect they're being used for immigration purposes and help connect them with legal assistance. We also work to educate people on the difference between legitimate international relationships and fraudulent ones. The goal isn't to discourage international love. It's to protect people on all sides of the immigration system. Last month, I testified before a congressional committee on immigration fraud, sharing my experience as part of a panel advocating for both stronger fraud prevention and more streamlined processes for legitimate couples. The system currently makes it difficult for genuine international couples while still having exploitable loopholes for fraudsters. Finding that balance is complex, but important work. As for my personal growth, the experience has left me with a strange gratitude. Without Catalina's intervention and my subsequent journey, I wouldn't have met Julie, wouldn't have found this advocacy work, and wouldn't have developed the judgment I now possess. What felt like a devastating betrayal became the redirection I needed. I still remember sitting in that coffee shop with Adriana, watching her mask drop as she coldly stated that our relationship was always a transaction. At the time, it felt like my world was collapsing. Now, I recognize it as the moment I was set free from a fraud I hadn't even fully comprehended. For those still sending messages asking for advice about their own situations, I'll say this. Cultural differences and immigration complications can create challenges in any international relationship, but they should never be used as a shield against legitimate questions. In a genuine relationship, your partner should welcome your need for reassurance, rather than weaponizing your concerns as xenophobia or distrust. And finally, I've learned that the most important aspect of trust isn't blind faith. It's building a relationship where both people can be trusted with the truth. Julie and I have complete access to each other's lives, not because we're monitoring each other, but because we have nothing to hide. That transparency isn't a burden, it's freedom. 3 years ago, I was nearly legally bound to someone living a double life. Today, I'm married to someone with whom I can fully share mine. The contrast couldn't be more profound. Sometimes the weddings that don't happen save us as much as the ones that do. Final update, 5 years later. This will be my last update on this chapter of my life, as it feels increasingly distant from who I am now. 5 years after my narrow escape from a fraudulent marriage, life has evolved in ways I never anticipated. Julie and I now have twin 3-year-old boys, Gabriel and Leo, who have absolutely no interest in my past drama, but are intensely interested in dinosaurs and anything with wheels. Our advocacy organization has grown into a nationally recognized resource for immigration fraud prevention and victim support. We've helped over 200 individuals extricate themselves from potential fraud situations and provided expert testimony in dozens of cases. Julie continues her work as a federal prosecutor, while I've transitioned to running our nonprofit full-time. Catalina and her family immigrated to Canada 2 years ago through their legitimate professional skills pathway. Her daughter is now in elementary school, and they had a second child last year. We visit each other at least once a year, and she serves on the advisory board of our organization. As for Adriana, according to Catalina, she finally gave up on international schemes and married a wealthy Colombian businessman 10 years her senior. Apparently, he's aware of her past, but married her anyway. I genuinely hope she's found whatever she was searching for and has stopped manipulating people. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Rafael has maintained his legitimate business and is now married with a child of his own. He occasionally provides insights for our organization's educational materials, believing that his experience can help prevent others from making similar mistakes. The most meaningful development in these 5 years has been witnessing the ripple effects of Catalina's courage. Her decision to warn me didn't just save me from legal jeopardy. It created a cascade of positive changes that have impacted hundreds of lives through our work. We've established a scholarship in her name for international students studying ethics and law. People often ask if I'm over what happened, but that framing misses the point. I'm not over it, so much as I've integrated it fully into my life's purpose. What Adriana intended as exploitation became the catalyst for some of my most meaningful work. The experience wasn't something to get past, it was something to build upon. For those still in the midst of similar situations who continue to message me, there is a full and beautiful life waiting on the other side of betrayal. The path forward isn't about forgetting or even necessarily forgiving. It's about transforming that experience into wisdom, purpose, and eventually, peace. My almost wedding taught me that sometimes the most loving thing a person can do is to tell you a painful truth. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is listen.